Welcome to our webinar this evening. With us tonight, we have a team of wonderful experts in horse and equine welfare. Um, we've got Susan Spratt, who is the BHS manager for Northern Ireland, Mark Robinson, who is a BHSI performance coach and an accredited BHS assessor. We've got Dr. Helen Spence, who runs Spence Horse Sense. She's a clinical equine behaviourist. And Dr. Esther Skelly Smith, who's probably known to a lot of you already as well. She's a vet, a chiropractic, and acupuncturist, laser, specialises in laser and equine dentistry as well. And we are also joined by Ashley from CAFRA, who's here to talk to us about worming schedules and the impact of worms on your equines. So together this team make up the BHS Ireland Horse Health Days team, and they've been going around the country doing horse health days, which I think are on the fourth lot. Have you done four already, Susan? Is that right? Yeah, brilliant. And the next there are three more days coming up in September. So one in Armagh and one in Strabane and one in Downpatrick, but we'll get a wee bit more detail on that later on. For now, I'm just going to let each of the guys introduce themselves to you and tell you a little bit about themselves and what they bring to these days and why their passion for equines has driven them towards this idea of welfare education and how they are delivering that. So if we start maybe with Susan, if you're happy enough to introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks, Molly. Well, as Molly introduced me, I'm the manager of the British Horse Society. I've been doing in Ireland, and I've been doing this job for 24 plus years now, so it's quite scary. But I am passionate about horses, and I always have been, and passionate about their welfare and the relationship that we have with them to make it as harmonious as ever. So these days are really to give people an opportunity to learn more, to give them dedicated time with this wonderful group of experts so that they can ask all the questions that they need to ask. And the outcome really is that their relationship with their horse will be improved and the harmony, and that both parties will be happier. And there was a great phrase that one of the daughters from Laurel View put online after our last session there was, "You don't know what you don't know." And that's what these days are all about. So thank you for being here this evening.
Super, thank you. Helen, do you want to go ahead there?
Sorry, just had to unmute myself. So I'm Helen Spence. I'm a clinical equine behaviourist. So that means basically that I give people advice on problem behaviour, any problems that they're having with their horses. But actually, I've been doing that for 22 years probably. But I actually am really passionate about avoiding problems. And I think that the better we can work on the relationship that people have with their horses, the way that they manage them, the way they train them, the way they care for them, so many problems can be prevented if we can get in there whenever there still aren't problems and just look at kind of what's going. So really what I do in these days is have a general chat about the horse that's there. I do a bit of an assessment based on what I can see, and we talk about the interactions that the owner has with the horse and how they manage them. And then I just try and give very basic signposting advice about what we can do to, if I see things that might become issues, or if there are little things that are kind of niggly things that we can address. But I just think it's all about having happier horses.
Super, thank you. Esther, do you want to jump in there?
Thanks, Molly. My name is Esther Skelly Smith. I am an equine vet by background. I graduated from Nottingham Vet School back in 2012, and I had the privilege to go on to work in the Animal Health Trust in Newmarket under a lady called Sue Dyson. And it was during my time there, I really started to learn as a vet the need for us to get into prevention rather than a cure mode. And I started to look at the more sort of the whole horse approach. You know, how can we manage issues? How can we prevent issues? Because quite often we're seeing these horses when the injury has happened, and a lot of these injuries and pain related issues are the prognosis for return, first of all, to full athletic function is quite limited in some of these occasions, and also the welfare of the horse can be very much affected if we don't prevent these issues sooner. So I returned home and I worked in a mixed practice as their equine vet, and then I went on to work in an equine dental clinic while I was doing further qualifications in veterinary chiropractic and acupuncture, chronic pain management, and then more latterly I became a certified equine rehabilitation practitioner through the University of Tennessee in 2021. But I established Shanahan Veterinary Services in 2017. And I'm really passionate about, a bit like the rest of the team here, around progressing animal welfare. In another side of my veterinary life, that led me to being involved in veterinary politics, and I'm the current Senior Vice President of North of Ireland Veterinary Association and the British Veterinary Association Northern Ireland branch, and I've recently been appointed to chair the working group in performance animals policy for the British Veterinary Association. So we are working within that team to look at the ethics and the what the position of the veterinary profession is on the use of animals in sport. So my passion really comes from, like the rest of this team, which is a fabulous team, in preventing issues. And I would also say one of the things that really works well within this team is that we all have a similar mindset, and we're all professionals that are fully qualified, but we're very keen to prevent issues sooner, because that has a positive impact on welfare. And Susan's phrase, "you don't know what you don't know," is very true. I think I'm from a horsey background in some ways. My parents weren't horsey, but have become very horsey because of me. So in some ways, I had a privilege of having parents that were quite questioning of what was going on, because they weren't steeped sometimes in the traditions of an industry. And I had instructors and teachers that were the same. So I think it gives us a slightly different view sometimes. But we now breed Irish sport horses and Irish drafts ourselves. But anyway, I'm going to keep quiet and let us move on. But I'm sure we can flesh that out as we go through the rest of the day. Thanks, Molly.
No problem. And Mark, do you want to jump in there, please?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name's Mark Robinson. I'm a British Horse Society performance coach, otherwise known as BHSI. So I'm kind of that person that's out there every day working on actually developing that bond between horse and rider, and in various different ways, I suppose developing the skill and the knowledge of the rider, and helping them to understand their horse in as best way as possible. And I'm, as well as that, I'm looking at the whole overview. So it's not just teaching the horse and rider, but it's looking at the equipment that they're using. It's thinking about the management of the horse and all of the other things that can relate to the horse's way of going when they're ridden. So I've developed quite a keen interest in the equipment that we use on our horses, and particularly bridles and bitting and things like that. They are one of the ways that we communicate with our horses when we're riding. And I went off and I trained with a lady called Hilary Vernon, who's a very well-known and very experienced lady who does bitting assessments. She has her own range of bits, and she also is involved in the design of many other brands of bits. So became quite interested in that, the comfort of the horse in their mouth, how the rider can have effective communication with the horse through the bit. So my role on the day of the Horse Health Days is, again, to be there to discuss some training with horses, or of the horses with the riders, but also to look at the equipment that they're using. We can give them some advice on the type of bit that they're using, how comfortable it might be for their horse, how effective it is at communicating with their horse. And while I'm not a qualified saddle fitter, I can have a brief overview at the look of the saddle and give a bit of guidance if anything is required, that they can go back to their own saddle fitter and help to make that more comfortable for their horse as well.
Super, thank you. And Ashley, do you want to let us know what you're up to?
Yeah, so my name is Ashley Robinson. I'm an equine lecturer at Caffrey, which is a educational college, and I'm based in the Enniskillen campus, which is our equine campus. So our kind of role then, obviously we're kind of coming from an educational side, but also just to kind of inform owners of the new kind of technologies and stuff. And we're going through coming from a parasite and worm side, so towards the health days. So I work with a team of colleagues during the health days, and we call ourselves Be Worm Wise with Caffrey, which is starting to grow. It started off with it just needed a catchy slogan, and now we're really developing it into quite a big project. But yeah, so our kind of role is just to give you a little bit of information about targeted worming programs. We all know about worming resistance and anthelmintic resistance, and it's just kind of being aware of what that means and how do we then develop a program that suits the horses individually and the yards individually. It's parasites aren't something that is very black and white. They're constantly evolving. The summer with this warm wet weather has been just, they love it, they just love it. So everything's evolving. Unfortunately, it's not just a yes or no for a yard, so it's kind of getting owners to understand the risk assessments based with it and the testing that's available. So our role we have at the health days, we do free worm counts for the horses that are at the health day. And we do that through a technology called FeekPack, which is just a software version of putting it under a microscope and manually looking at it. So that's just us kind of giving you a bit of an insight on some of the technology that's there, but whilst we can give you then the guidance and stuff when we're there as well.
Super. Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Well, guys, I think we probably just dive straight in at the deep end here. Obviously, welfare has come under particular spotlight given the situation prior to the Olympics around equines and in particular equines in sport. And whenever I hear conversations going on about welfare, a lot of them seem to be around this idea of welfare being almost a box that needs to be kind of ticked, and you need to have, perhaps welfare policies, or, you have to have welfare guidelines and things like that. But what I'm kind of gathering from all of you and from your different passions and different approaches is this idea that actually welfare is integral to every element of your horse, whether that's feeding, tack, turnout, all of those things. And if you educate yourself in the welfare of your horse in those different areas, you will actually prevent other things happening. So your horse may perform better, your horse will be more amenable in the stable, your horse will be easier to ride, all of these things. But it's this idea, how do you think we progress this conversation from welfare seeming like a judgment or something that you need to satisfy, to actually educating people to understand that welfare is integral to everything and every movement they do with their horse? Is that something that you guys have come across? Is that a correct reflection on how you're trying to take welfare forward? I don't know, Helen, do you want to start with that one, or
Yeah.
Helen, will I speak first and then you come in after me? Only just to say that really the whole relationship with your horse, how you moderate and check how your horse is every minute that you're with it, is really what we're after. This is what is at the very heart of what Helen does, Mark does, Esther does, Ashley does as well. She has horses too. And what I do, it's reading those subtle signs from your horse. They're always communicating. It's not a one-way street. And it's just to make people listen and to give them the tools to recognise. And Helen's the expert on that. Handing over to Helen.
Well, I was just going to say, obviously, the kind of latest thing that has been talked about more is this idea of positive mental health for horses, so quality of life. And the 5-domain model has shifted our focus in terms of welfare actually onto that positive mental health being at the heart of all the welfare. So it's not just physical welfare and mental welfare, it's the whole thing together. And that's why all of this matters. And of course, it's all integrated. I think for a long time, you know, even in medicine and, you know, in the human side of things, we've had this split between physical health and mental health. And what we're recognizing now is that that's not actually the case, and that it's all integrated together, and it's the same obviously with the horses. So as Susan says, I think that's why these days work so well, because we're all there on the day, and we can all work together, you know, and every change helps the horse. But I think, yes, I 100% agree with you, Molly, that people are a little bit scared of welfare, because it was used as a, you know, it's a legislation thing. It's been used as a threat, you know, that's kind of how it's structured. And actually, that's not why it matters. So this shift towards looking at it as a positive thing, and quality of life, and enhancing quality of life. So it's a bit like me saying, as a behaviourist, I don't want to treat behaviour problems. I don't actually want to do that. I mean, I can do it. It's what I do. I want to advise breeders and, you know, people with youngsters and people getting a horse for the first time, and help them understand the steps that they can take that mean that they can provide their horse with the happiest life, I guess. You know, so that's kind of my view of it.
Yeah. And Esther, did you want to jump in there? Did you have?
Yeah, look, I think it's sort of been covered already a wee bit. Welfare was the big taboo word, you know, and I think we all were like, I think in the industry, certainly in the past, we didn't want to talk about the issue of welfare, because, you know, it was only really the animal activists and those outside. But we come back to the concept of social license and how the public view our sport, and even how we as an industry view what we do with horses. And I think one of the interesting statistics for me was the work done by World Horse Welfare through YouGov in 2023, where 60% of the population, which was a representative sample of the British public, had issues with the continued use as the status quo of horses involved in sport. And we can define what sport is, but that's everything really what we do with our horse, and we take it from a hack right through, and even to our horses being used in equine assisted therapy. Those horses are being used for something that we as people want to do with them, that they wouldn't necessarily have chose for themselves. If we look at those stats a wee bit further, 20% of people didn't believe horses should continue being involved in sport in any circumstances. And that's quite a major shift from previous stats out there. So what's really encouraging for me, and I think this is what we need to take from it, the industry is starting to have very positive conversations about this. And this is not about blaming people. You know, I think there's a big part of education and coming together and really trying to understand where things are going from a point of view of science. Science has moved on. We know horses learn differently than we thought 20, 30 years ago, or how your great granda did it back in the day. We know that how horses think is, you know, we know scientifically that has changed, and we understand from a welfare point of view that is changing. So I think we actually need to have a really positive conversation as an industry, and I think we individually have to take accountability for that. I think sometimes we think it's somebody else's problem, or it's that person on the racehorse, or it's that person in the Olympics. It actually, we see as in my personal opinion, I think we see as many welfare issues across the whole industry as we do in some of the high level sports. Where we see coming forward is accountability in some of those higher performance sport. Like if you look at some of the positive things that are happening from a point of view of the racing industry and from a point of view of the FEI, while they mightn't be perfect, those are positive steps for improvement around equine welfare. And I think from a point of view of people using animals and horses in equine assisted therapy and learning, which is what we're here really to talk about in some ways, I think those horses equally have as many welfare challenges. I had a student, I work with Queens, I'm an honorary lecturer with Queens, and I had a master's student 4 or 5 years ago, and we worked with a number of groups to assess the status quo of the pain levels, for want of a better word, of those animals in use that were being used in both therapeutic riding and also just on the ground. And from my perspective, some of those horses were really well kept, but also some of the owners and the people that were using those animals weren't aware that some of those horses were actually struggling with some areas, and they didn't know that. And that was genuinely that they weren't doing anything deliberate. They just didn't know. And actually, that was a fantastic opportunity to work with them to have something positive. And I know one of the organizations in particular has been a real encouragement to me, because they have now taken on doing lots of groundwork and pole work to build the core stability of their horses. So when them horses are ridden, they're in a better condition for the riders. And we come back to what equine assisted therapy and learning is there for, the physical side of it. You know, we're looking the benefits of that neuromuscular and neurology side of the riding activity to help the person. If a horse itself is uncomfortable, that is going to affect the ability of that horse to be able to do its job as a equine assisted therapy horse. Now, quite often we find that horses that are used in therapy are actually the horses that aren't comfortable to continue in a performance life, or aren't able to be used in a riding school. So there is challenges across the industry, but I think it's a really positive conversation to be having, and it would be lovely to have a group of consensus around developing what the welfare standards even look like there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, Mark, I'd love to kind of delve in with you a little bit around there's a lot more focus now, which is wonderful, on groundwork and a bit of pole work and lunging and building up your horse from the ground up, which wasn't necessarily there. It wasn't as prevalent, but certainly when I was starting to ride a million years ago. But there's also a much wider choice of tack, of bits, of saddles, of all sorts of things. And you only need to go on to your Instagram or your Facebook or whatever, and there's ads for everything, there's solutions for everything and all of that. And I think what is so invaluable about what you guys are delivering is that actual hands-on, looking at the individual horse, and using your experience as well as your knowledge and how you've educated yourselves in the new stuff moving forward, so you're able to progress the industry, but in a way that is welfare focused and friendly for the horses. But I imagine that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes in terms of the information that's out there for people.
Yeah, I think it can be very overwhelming for people, because you can go into many tack shops and there's an entire wall full of bits, and some of the bits might be very well designed for certain types of mouths and certain types of horses. Other bits may not be so well designed. But as you mentioned about all of the other pieces of equipment and gadgets and things like that, and I think at times people are guilty that if something's not working, it's easier to change the bit, or it's maybe easier to pop a gadget on, or maybe they like the look of that new saddle that's on the market or whatever, rather than looking beyond those things and thinking about, well, what other areas need to be looked at. Sometimes it's the biggest home truth for people is actually there's nothing wrong with their tack. They just need to put more effort into the way they ride, or maybe their own fitness, develop their own skill and their own balance to help their horse. There's a post that pops up on Facebook every now and again that I can't remember who it was that wrote it, but it was something about saying, get your tack right and then forget about it. And if you have a bit that works well and your saddle fits well and it's regularly checked and your bridle fits well, then actually sometimes it's time and patience, understanding how horses learn and working with the horse at that horse's pace that will eventually help to improve the horse. But I think it's, as an industry, sometimes we're a little bit guilty of chopping and changing bits and chopping and changing bits of equipment to try and make it all happen a bit quicker.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's where, I don't think you can underestimate how knowing your horse and having that bond with your horse and having the time and the patience to put into that horse. And Helen, you must see this. I mean, we would have occasionally you would see horses coming to equine assisted services that have maybe, as Esther said, they haven't worked out elsewhere, and then they are thought to be suitable for equine assisted services, whether it be groundwork or ridden work. But actually, unless you understand where that horse has come from, the issues that horse had, you're not going to be able to deliver the best results for your clients when you're using that horse, nor are you going to have a horse that is happy in its workplace. So how is a horse behavioralist when people come to you on the day? What sort of things do you look for? Do you talk to people about? I mean, I understand most of this, accountability is not, nobody, very few people are deliberately hurting their horses or deliberately going out of their way to make them uncomfortable. So is this education piece, around, it's not a judgment, it's just how do you start to work on that human equine bond in a different way?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, for me, it's about, so the first thing I'm always doing is reading the horse's body language, assessing how they respond to my approach interactions with me initially, because, I do that all the time, and as Mark would and Esther would. But it's then drawing people's attention to the things that I'm seeing. So there's a, yes, absolutely, it has to be done carefully, because nobody wants to be told their horse is unhappy if they aren't aware of it. So it's just starting to point out the little things that the horse is saying. And if you do it in a gentle way, people tend to go, oh, yes. Oh, I that's just, you've just made me think of such and such. This is what he does at home, or this is what happened to him 5 years ago, or, so it is, as Susan said, the more we can understand and read the horse, the more we can recognize the things that are causing them the issues. It's all very well having this is what makes horses happy and this is what makes them unhappy. But actually, it's about looking at the individual. So, and especially if we think about it in the therapeutic setting, I do think it's really important that the horses that we're working with are comfortable with what they're doing, not just physically, but mentally, that they aren't shut down, that they aren't traumatized to the point that they aren't have stopped telling the world, and you do sometimes see horses that are like that, and people don't always see what's happening, don't always see that, and they just see a horse that is coping very well, but actually that horse has just put a lid on everything, so it's helping people start to recognize all those signs. Anyone can recognize a horse that is really miserable in terms of reactivity, and but it's actually the more subtle stuff, I think, that the more we can help people see that, the better,
Yeah. And actually, how do you see obviously when sort of think of, like, you have your horse on a regular worming schedule, and that's worming covered, obviously science and technology have moved on substantially since then, and knowledge has changed significantly, but how do you bring worms into the kind of overall welfare of the horse? What is the impact that you're doing? What impact does it have?
Yeah, so it kind of brings, I suppose, everything together. As a whole, we're talking about equine health and equine welfare, but it links hand in hand very well with your nutrition and your behavior. If you have a high parasite burden, it can be impacting your horse in lots of different ways. Commonly we think, it's just a drop of body weight, but they can be a very in great condition, look great, doing everything fine, but maybe have a behavioral change because of pain associated with it. And we could be going down a different track in terms of pain when it could be something like a parasite infection. And it's just kind of making it aware as a whole and you know, whenever we're looking at everything and we're looking at the tack of our horse and we're looking at, you know, the behavior and how they're moving and all of that, it's just having the whole health impact together. And again, in terms of nutrition, it all links in very well as well, making sure that they have the, you know, they're getting the right balanced diet, and all of that, they're the right body weight. But if you're struggling to get something to keep weight on, it could potentially be a parasite issue. And on the other hand, sometimes people get very surprised and they have big parasite burdens and the horse is in great condition, and they can just be these things called high shedders. So it's just it's all changed so much. You know, what I was advising 5 years ago is definitely not what I'm advising now in terms of the same thing. It's constantly moving, it's constantly changing because of the development of our wormer resistance, and also just that they're you know, the parasites are evolving with our environmental change and all of that. Even in England, they're having bother with the dung beetle population reducing, which is impacting it all. We're learning a lot more about how toxic our wormers can be to our actual environment. So something like an ivermectin chemical can still be up to 100% toxic when it goes back onto our grass if we're kind of spreading that manure again. So there's lots of studies to see what we're doing and how we can prevent this from happening. And I think as well, it's that little bit of, oh, sure, I always did it that way and I'll just keep doing it. And it's that wee bit of a social behavioural change that we need to understand how to make that change as well. Do you know, it's putting trust into something, and sometimes, especially when it comes to our horse's health, we're better safer than sorry. But unfortunately, we could be making a problem worse without realizing it. So education as well on the testing, and that's what we try to do. You know, it can be a minefield, just like the bits and stuff. You know, you go into a tack shop and there's loads of different wormers, and it's like, oh, you know, I always hear it, and it's like, give me the strongest wormer. What's the strong? It's not like a, you know, you're not treating a migraine, and it's going to be the strongest thing. You know, it's different chemicals for different parasites, and they have different actions on the parasite, and that should be targeted at different times of the year. And you know, and that actual testing, it's not just your worm counts. You need to make sure you're testing for your tapeworm, but we also need to be aware that we're not then letting other parasites that we have in control from wormers build back up again in the population. So there's lots, it's not just black and white, and so that's why we're trying to kind of help to educate it. And if we have, you know, the likes of our advocates almost, you know, that our owners are coming to speak to, and that they get advice from, then, and if they have that kind of knowledge, then they should be, you know, we're going to be able to try and get it trickled down as a little bit more of an easier way of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Super. And I think as well, you know, it's expensive to keep equines in any capacity at the moment. And I think, you know, the idea around welfare, if you begin to really educate yourself and understand how all these different facets come together, you can actually, it can be much more affordable, as well as much more rewarding, as well as perhaps enhancing performance, all of that stuff. But there isn't, you know, I think there's some arguments around, you know, welfare will, you know, we have to get the most expensive feeds, you have to get the most expensive bedding, you've got to have really good you know, all this stuff. That's not actually what it is. It's once you break down, you know, the sort of educational piece, and you become familiar with, you know, active turnout and different, you know, different wormers to use and different feeds to use, you can actually, it can make it more affordable as well, which is something that's got to be, you know, at the sort of forefront of everyone's minds at the moment. And sort of speaking of that affordability, Susan, you talked me briefly through how the days actually go, and I think you said it was sort of at £20 per person for the session. It seems brilliant, but maybe if you could detail for those attending, you know, how the days actually work and how that's kind of set up is.
Molly, you're absolutely right. It is £20 per horse and rider for the day. And we have 2 sessions each day. So we have a morning session and we have an afternoon session. And we have 6 horses and riders in the morning and 6 in the afternoon. Now, that seems very few. But when I tried to timetable the whole thing, it was the only number of people that we could fit in, that each person got that personal interaction and got the maximum out of the day. And of course, welfare and the horse is everything the British Horse Society is about, and we are a charity, so we are putting back and investing in the welfare and happiness and the interaction with humans and equines financially from our charity. We also will have the BHS welfare team. A representative will be over doing some weighing of horses, and I have to tell you, there's very few that are underweight, very few that are the perfect weight, and quite a few that are overweight. But it's getting the people just to recognise that actually their animal could do with losing a bit of weight. And I have to say, all of mine could do with losing a bit of weight. But I do recognise it. It's a difficult thing to balance. So yes, we start off with Esther doing a demo with a horse where she is seeing what's in front of her, talking about maybe the unlevelness that she sees. I mean, Esther's obviously the expert to talk about this, and she also is using a new IT app that vets will use and interpret what they see. So we have Esther doing a one-off demo, but there the rest of the time to come and chip in with whatever the others are seeing to support and interact. And then each person is timetabled to go round each of the individual experts to have a chat about their own relationship with their own horse. And that's where it's so fabulous for me to work with such a passionate team. And you heard the word passion coming from nearly everybody that has spoken this evening. And we are all passionate about what we do. We work as a team. We support each other. There's never a crossword or somebody going against each other. And in the evenings, if we are around the dinner table, we are still talking about the same topics. We're still asking questions, trying to find out more. What more could we do? Could we find out this? How do we pass it on more effectively? So it's great to be part of this superb team. And we'd like to really invite everybody here to come along, whether with your horse or on foot, and come and listen to us ranting and chatting and interacting about what we love.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think so there are 3 more days, there are 3 days in the upcoming session. So there's one at Castledillon in Armagh, is that right? And then one at Ballyskay in Strabane, and one at Tullymurray in Downpatrick. So whenever we send out the recording of this webinar, we will send a link to all of those. If we send like a booking link, Susan, that would probably be the easiest.
Yes, and also what I can send on, each person has done a short video introduction to what they're doing, and I send this out as part of once somebody books on, this information is sent to them. So there's a raft of information there, talks about bridle fitting, bits, saddle fitting, all the different topics that are important to your horse. I have a recording of somebody who is an expert talking about it, and I can send it to anybody that's interested.
And I think, was there another member of the team, I think he dips in and out, is it Alan Hiscox, did you say, that does?
Yes.
From the Met Police?
That's right. Alan Hiscox is quite a character, and he worked for the Metropolitan Police for many years, the Mounted Division, and he was head of and I'm sure I haven't got the right terminology, but he was the one that set up the performances that you would have seen at the Olympia and wherever these superb horses were jumping through hoops and saddles over their heads. And he rode through the streets of London, accompanied the Queen. So he will be a very interesting addition, and I'm sure he'll be fascinated to work with you, Helen, as well, and how you introduce horses to, well, buses and all the noise and interaction in London. You see, there we are, we're off again. We can have a really good chat about everything. But
I know, and it struck me as particularly within Equine Assisted Services, there actually are a lot of things going on often for the horses to take in, you know, and there might be equipment they're not familiar with and tools that are used within the arena and stuff that they're maybe not familiar with. And it actually seemed like a really exciting addition, and you know, in terms of the equine assisted services education piece.
And of course, have to say he is there really as our safety director now. So he'll
Okay.
be talking about safety on the roads, safety off the roads. He also will be talking with his colleague Des Payne about how to use your trailer and your lorry more safety, some good tips on things to check before you travel and when you're traveling. So they're a great addition to our team, and I'm looking forward to having them as part of it.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, I could chat to you guys for hours here, but we we do try and stick roughly to 45 minutes. Now we're going to go over tonight, but that's exciting and fine. So I'm going to open it to questions from anybody in the field. Ashley, if you can have a look there and see what questions we have. Guys, has anyone got a question for the team? Let's see. Got any? Here we go. Ashley, have we, oh. Okay, so Siobhan Griffin is just wondering, Esther, what the software is that you use for your demos?
Yeah, so the purpose of the demos really is to help us look and work through a couple of horses together to assess them from a biomechanic point of view. But in the most recent demo days, I've added in the addition of Slipe, and Slipe is a piece of AI that records your horse without putting any biomechanics markers on it. It actually records the horse in walk and trot and on lunge, and it allows us to look at the symmetry. Now, like all artificial intelligence, it has its limitations, but what's been really nice to use it alongside is, and I suppose in some ways I've been quite brave, because quite often I'm meeting these horses for the first time. I quickly take the video at the start and upload it. Then we talk through what I've seen, and then we see, does the AI agree with me? It shows whether the horse is landing heavier on one foot or if there's asymmetry in movement. And historically, a lot of the artificial intelligence or the biomechanical and gait analysis softwares did have limitations. They are improving now over time. They do need sensible interpretation still, but it is a useful tool. And the idea behind Slipe is that eventually your owner, well, I know owners can also record videos in an app. Some of my clients record their horses regularly, particularly the high level performance horses or a horse that we're rehabbing, and they will send the videos in on the app. And so we can track the improvement in asymmetry, we can track the improvement in lameness. It's really an asymmetry assessment primarily. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, Siobhan. I thought I was wondering if I was asleep there. No, sleep, I think it was another app that she was going to use. Have we got any more questions? I think, can you see? I'm just...
I think Ruth has got her hand up.
Ruth, yeah, go ahead there, Ruth. What? Sorry, Ruth, you're mute there. Just we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Is that okay?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Thank you. My question is, if I, as a non therapist or not formally involved, if I owned or had a horse or an equine or access to an equine that seemed to me that they would be a potentially good candidate to be used or to be involved in equine assisted services. They were calm, they seemed happy to me, they've been bridle fitted, saddle fitted, and I thought, well, I would be happy to offer this. Is there a process? Can somebody come? Who comes? Can somebody go through, meet the horse a few times? What way does that work?
Why don't you bring the horse to one of our days, Ruth?
Okay, so I'm just asking in principle, the horse would come to one of your days then?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can do it like that. We are not set up to do this sort of thing for that particular reason, but all horses and equines are welcome, and they're all equal, and we're all more than happy to look and to give you feedback as to what we see.
Okay.
In a very positive way.
Perfect.
So you'd be very welcome, Ruth.
Great starting point. Thank you.
And Ruth, there's a lot of research being done around the selection processes for horses to be used in equine assisted services, but it doesn't sit on its own. It is part of this wider idea of possible social licensing and educating people around welfare and looking at the overall equine and the issues or lack of issues that horse may have. So I think, Esther, something I'm really excited about. We've had many conversations around in this kind of area, and it is certainly something that needs to be developed. Whether it needs to go to a legislative level, I don't know yet, but there is definitely some sort of procedure that needs to be put in place with equine's welfare at the heart of it.
Can I just jump back in there, Molly? I think that's it.
Yeah.
We have to keep thinking horse first, and I think that needs to be looked at when we look at the fact that we have no legislative protections, well, very little legislative protections for horses. Our strategy in Northern Ireland in particular, but Ruth, actually what you're suggesting is what we really need is a set of guidance as it comes through in the research to help you as an owner and us as industry. We know as vets there's a range in how well we're good at picking up lamenesses and problems in any profession. Like, some of the research out there shows that up to horses that were thought to be physically sound and well, and from a musculoskeletal point of view, up to 56, 57, 60%. Some of the studies have showed that they have subtle signs of lameness or musculoskeletal problems. So I think it's taking your hypothetical horse and possibly getting a bit of support with professionals. On the day, I don't personally look at the individual horses. I'm really there to signpost, because there's a number of rules around the Royal College and working with your primary care vet that I wouldn't just assess a horse on the day. But I can certainly signpost, or if the guys ask me some general advice, we signpost on the day to maybe helping you make those decisions or where to go to get a bit of help.
I mean, I've asked about the starting position, but I presume it's an ongoing process anyway, as things would go on. Thank you.
Yeah, super. Very good. Does anyone else have any more questions for the guys?
Hello, it's Joy here. I'm just wondering whether, hi there, excellent everybody. It sounds really amazing. I was just wondering whether there was any obligation on BHS approved riding schools to have their ponies looked at from the team, or whether you've done that sort of thing, or is there any plans to?
Well, we have an inspector, as you would know, Joy, that goes out regularly to each of the riding schools, and the horses are looked at, probably not every single one, but they're looked as an overview and how they're kept, etc. And certainly these horse health days have taken place at BHS approved riding schools and livery yards. We've been working around them all, and many of the horses there, we've had samples have been used for Esther as trot up horses, and the owners, managers have been involved with the days. So we're passing on our information to enhance the lives of all the horses we come into contact with.
Yeah.
And does that sound a bit better? Yeah.
And I think what's really exciting as well is to see, Mark's trained to BHS, possibly going to be a fellow. There are people coming through the BHS who are learning this new stuff, and are excited to learn it and excited to incorporate it, and even more, excited to share it, which is wonderful. And this idea that the BHS itself has to progress and educate people in the new ways of working. And the fact that, Susan, you've embraced this and created these days and brought this team of young, exciting people together to make sure that the BHS as an educator is, you know, at the forefront of that and put that passion across is really, really important to ensure, I guess, that the industry here moves in the right direction as a collective, you know, which it's from my point of view is a brilliant thing.
It's the only thing that I ask of people that come is that what they learn, they pass it on. And that's what it's all about. It's drop a pebble in the sea or the pond and see the ripples spread. And that's what we're all about.
Fantastic. Well, look, guys, I'm not going to keep you any longer. I just really want to thank you all for coming tonight. And I know we've literally just, you know, scraped the surface of what you guys are doing on a daily basis and trying to get across to everybody. So what we'll do is we will send out the recording of this webinar, and we will send the link to the 3 days that are coming up. And if you're happy, I don't know, Esther, Helen and Mark, we have, you know, contact details for yourselves, websites and things, if you're happy that they are maybe shared, if people want to specifically ask you something or get in touch, you know, to book sessions in with you yourselves, if you're happy for those to be shared, we can do that as well. And actually, I think there's probably a lot that people don't know about what you guys are doing in terms of the worming thing. And perhaps, I don't know, do CAFRA have like a day, an education day on, or do you have like an online kind of flyer or anything, somewhere we can sort of signpost people to go and read a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so I can definitely provide some resources and we'll get it sent out. But yeah, Be Worm Wise is progressing. So we do have some things up the pipeline, webinars, short courses, all based on parasite control and stuff. So that's all coming. So definitely we can keep you posted in the right direction, but I can give you some resources to get started as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Super. Well, look, guys, thank you so much for this evening. It's been really, really great, really informative, and hopefully we'll see a good few of our practitioners on the days. And it's just to reiterate, there is a possibility, you probably need to speak to Susan directly about this, but there's a possibility if you don't want to bring horses, it might not always work in terms of equine assisted services. You might not have specific equines that you want to bring, but there is a possibility of you being able to attend without the horse in a sort of spectator role. But that'll be dependent on who, I guess, the participants are, you know, with their own horses and things in each of the days. But that is a possibility. So if that would be of interest to you, please do speak to Susan. And we also will try and progress this a bit more and see if we can maybe set something up specific to our practitioners with the team as well. So guys, thank you so much. It's been a really great evening. Cheers. Thank you.